You are listening to eRadio by Mist Apex. We are electric. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the eRadio Show. Today's episode is called Del Este, I'm Matt Trumpets, and I'm joined by our intrepid journo, Chris Rainbow Sparkles Stevens. How's it going there, Chris?
It's going good, Matt. How are you?
Oh, me, I'm carefree and having a blast. We have a race coming up.
We do. A return to Punta del Este is very exciting, and it was a great track when we were there before. So I expect it'll be some good racing again this time round.
Yeah, well, it's one of our favorite tracks. It's led to some of the best races we've seen, and it's quite the challenge for the cars too. Just in terms of both the surface and in terms of managing the battery, right?
Yeah, it's a really good one. I mean, it being right by the beach, the sand is constantly blowing onto the circuit, so you've got ever-changing track conditions, and so as well as just kind of having to manage the regen and the battery temperatures, the drivers having to think on their feet in that sense. They also have to kind of improvise about what kind of grip that they're going to have when they approach a corner as well. So it's a real driving and technical challenge. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the new cars approach this, especially now that they're going an awful lot quicker and they're running so much more on the limit when it comes to usable energy and battery management.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure it's being everyone's favorite has absolutely nothing to do with its utter proximity to that very said beach, does it?
No, no, it's a fantastic setting though, isn't it? Like Long Beach, it's just gorgeous.
Yes, well, enjoy it while we have it because this, although last year was technically the last year, this is the last year, isn't it?
Yeah, we had the sort of interim in season three, and so I was really disappointed not to see it on the calendar in season three. So in a way, I'm almost relieved that although we've lost a track in Brazil, we've managed to get something together here, and it means we go back to Punta del Este. So everyone's a winner.
Yes, and yeah, I for one have always enjoyed the races there, but it will be fun to see them trying to make the most of their newfound power, as it were. But before we get too far into talking about it, I understand there may be some big dirty news.
Big Dirty News.
All right, so what is it? Tell us. What has happened, Mr. Stevens?
Well, we had a World Motorsport Council meeting quite recently, so there were a lot of decisions made about the future of the F3 Championship, for example. But the ones we're focused on are the ones that concern Formula E for next season. And we've been debating about this a lot on the show about how Formula E will retain an element of strategy in the post-car swap era, because, of course, no pit stops, and they were tinkering around with a lot of ideas like you come in and can recharge, but it was a sort of a little bit gimmicky, wouldn't have looked very entertaining, so I think that one was retired to the scrap heap quite early on. The thing that kind of emerged as the favorite was the idea of being able to use different power modes in the race, and you get like an extra boost, kind of almost like a push to pass system.
Yeah.
So that's what we've ended up getting. We've got two different power modes, and you have to use them in the race. So you can't just just sit on your lower power mode and conserve a little bit more energy. You've got to at some point use this higher power mode setting, which is going to be sort of 20 to 25 kilowatts more power. That'll be worth about a second a lap.
Yeah.
That's what the kind of estimation is at this point. But beyond that, the full details aren't really known. We don't know if it's sort of an idea of you have to use it in blocks of laps. Do you get sort of maybe 5 laps of this high power, and you can use them however you want during the race. You maybe one at a time, use two to try and get past someone, or you have to use them all in one go, or
Yeah.
whether it's a set amount of energy that you can then use up in sort of little blips, almost like a like a push to pass or a curve system or something like that. So we should get the full details on that soon. But as yet, we just know that there's going to be the use of different power modes, which sounds quite exciting because it keeps the action on the track rather than in the pits.
Yeah, well, it does, and it sounds very much like other ideas I've heard floated for Formula One, like Summers with his timed DRS, and really, I think you're good calling it right now in terms of similar to IndyCar push to pass, where you get a timed amount of boost. The only difference being here, of course, that you have to use all of it up, or by the end of the race, where I'm not sure you're required to. But honestly, given the way it's going to be employed tactically, I think it would be a real challenge. The cars are
Yeah,
just too close together right now. It would be a real challenge for someone to not use it all up because the differential over the course of a lap, 1 second, and especially if you consider the relative lack of downforce on these cars, 1 second a lap is huge.
yeah, it's a massive gain. It's probably more powerful than DRS or any push to pass system we've seen in the past. You mentioned if you have to use it all up, I'm not sure if that's actually the case. It just says you kind of have to use it at some point. So it might just be that you get, say, if you get 5 laps worth and you only use 2, do you have to use up those last 3 laps? So again, that's details that will come with time.
Well, yes, the lack of details is what makes all the arguing possible. So it's fine with me if they hold off for a bit. Gives us
Yeah, no, we've got to speculate at some point, haven't we?
yes.
Fauzi in the chat room actually points out that the point that we haven't brought up yet, it's less dangerous for the mechanics. And of course, that's a hot topic right now is the pit stops while we've still got them.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will be very happy to not be in the line of fire as the drivers try and get in and out of the pits as fast as possible. So what else do we have going on? What else came out of this? What else came out of this council that we should know about that applies to Formula E?
Oh, so in addition, slightly shorter races. They're about 40 minutes now, so it's about 10 minutes shorter than what we have going on at the moment. I'm not sure quite yet why exactly this is the case. My first thought, and it's a rather negative one, and one that I kind of hope isn't the case, which is that if we're going to a car that's supposed to be able to do the entire race, can actually run for 50 minutes at pace. So I don't know if that is the case. It is pure speculation at this point because I don't know why we've gone to a shorter race. It might be something to do with television. Trying to get the program done into maybe like a 1 hour slot to make it a little bit more friendly for people, people like Channel 5 who seem to take every opportunity they can to shorten the Formula E coverage. I'm sure they're the only ones, and you can't really blame them if it's not bringing in the views at the moment. I'd be very keen to find out why that is the case. Other than that, the timetable isn't going to be changed, so we're still running in 1 day, practice 1, 2, qualifying unchanged, and then the 40-minute race. The thing for next year is that you won't get a point for fastest lap anymore. You get a point for the most efficient driver. And my first question is, how on earth is this going to work? Because in my head, if you've won the race, you've been the most efficient driver because you've gone the quickest by using, the least energy. And that to me is what efficiency is. So is it just whoever used the least amount of energy in the race?
Well, it can't be, because then you could just, much like people were doing with Fast Lap, you could just troll around at half speed and just be nothing but an obstacle on track. So I would guess that perhaps they're going to have some kind of matrix between finishing position or positions gained and energy left at the end of the race. But I want to circle back real quick and ask you, is it possible that the shortened race is entirely due to the use of this extra power mode?
Well, see, that's the thing. We don't know how that's going to fit in. Whether you already have like an extra amount that is separate for that boost power, that extra little stored bit of energy, because these cars have a little bit of allowance in them anyway. Because of course you have to be able to do your in lap after the race as well. So there is a kind of conservative bit of energy left in there in the cars already. But for things like fan boost, that comes out of your usable energy. Will that be the same for this? You would say maybe it is, but would it be technically possible when it's so much more powerful and worth so much more now? That is something I'd be quite keen to know. And actually, it is an interesting point that you bring up, and one that, frankly, I don't have the answer to right now. Again, it's pure speculation.
Well, we here at eRadio and Mr. Apex live for baseless speculation. It's what drives our show sideways into the ditch that it likes to live in. Okay, and then there's one more bit of news that is particularly near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, the New York City race, it will be the finale of this season's championship. That's what we were expecting. They've been trying to find a Montreal replacement, but nothing's come through. There were rumors of a Birmingham Super E Prix or something like that, or even a race at Brands Hatch was mooted at one point. But that's not going to be the case. So we will see the championship end in New York City. And frankly, what a way to end the season,
Yeah, well, I for one am delighted, but I'm not really delighted because I wish that we had Canada also on the docket somehow. It was nice to have those 2 weekends with 2 races per weekend, but I'll take it. In New York, here we come. Do we have, by the way, or do we have confirmation that it's going to be the same venue as last time, or is that still got an asterisk next to it in the chart?
I mean, most of the tracks still do have asterisks next to them, and they will do until about 2 weeks before the race, really, because everything's done not last minute, but it's not like you can send someone 6 months in advance to check if the circuit's okay, because they're prepped a week before the event is held. So you're always going to have that little asterisk, but I haven't come across a scenario where it's meant that actually we can't go through with this and the race is cancelled. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same as last year. Whether they'll be making any modifications to the track, which they can do really, because it's held in a giant car park, so they can basically do whatever they want with it.
Actually, I'm going to pull that rare card. Having been to the venue myself, they can't. It's actually held in 2 car parks separated by a road. They're fairly hemmed in. The start of the race is held between a building and a pier, and then you go down a main drive that leads to the cruise ship, and then they exit into the car park, which was the other part of the track. But I was curious, or I was at least modestly hopeful, that perhaps they might be searching for alternative venues that would give them a little more flexibility and be a little more set in the city, as it were, because although Red Hook is technically part of Brooklyn, it's fairly far away from everything and is mostly useful because it has that great backdrop of downtown Manhattan. But there are closer places they could move to, and I was just curious if they were perhaps considering that, given the asterisk next to it. But your answer is basically removing all hope for me. So thanks for that.
Oh well, I'm very sorry, but it's that thing of Formula One has been able to get a proper middle of the city race going in New York, and Formula E is the closest we've got to that. And don't get me wrong, it's a lovely setting. You have the cityscape in the background, the harbor, the pier, everything. It looks great, but it ain't downtown Manhattan. And that is kind of the dream aspect. So I don't think we'll be getting there quite just yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were looking to make a long-term thing of this, and they were going to push that in the next 5 years or so.
All right, well, then I'll just say it. Formula E, if you're listening and you need an expert on New York City, I happen to A, live here, and B, have driven almost every inch of it. So if you're looking for a new place, give me a call. I'd be glad to help. All right, well, what say we move on and talk about your big adventure this week? Because it wasn't just me that you talked to. You also had a wee chat with a certain driver, didn't you?
Yes, so we have got a short interview with Neo's Oliver Turvey just after his maiden podium in Mexico, and he seemed very happy about it, unsurprisingly. But we had a bit of a chat about Mexico, about the rest of the season, and a little bit about next year as well. So yeah, absolutely enjoy the interview. So for live stream viewers, again, we're not going to play the interview on stream just because we'll be sitting here for 20 minutes doing nothing. So if you do want to check out the interview, you can download or listen to on Spreaker the full episode, which gets released later today, or you can check back on this channel a little bit later. We'll be uploading it onto here as well.
All right, then. Now that we've heard that fascinating interview with Oliver Turvey, let's get to the good stuff. Let's talk about the race. I've never hit that button before, and I don't think I will ever hit it again. What was that?
That was one of my favorite bumpers. What's wrong with you?
It's much louder than the others, but I think it will be okay. All right, so tell us, what are we looking at? Who do we need to be paying attention to in Punta del Este?
Well, of course, the big headline going into this weekend is that Audi have finally got the fix for Lucas di Grassi's car. And of course, the delay in that, they had it ready for Mexico City, but they weren't actually allowed to implement it. And that's because if you want to change a homologated part, as all the elements of the powertrain are, you have to wait a certain amount of time. And so that's what the delay has been. They can implement it now that time has passed. So we should theoretically finally going to see the true pace of Lucas di Grassi in that Audi and what he can do. That car has won 2 races, I will say. Technically only one, but in reality it's won 2 races. So can he, get himself up there? Can he finally deliver on the promise? He thinks that Audi can still win the most races of any manufacturer this season, or any team, I should say, really, if Techeetah are, a winning force and a force to be reckoned with at this point. So that's what I'm really looking out for. Whether it's a fix that actually works, whether they encounter other issues because of it. Has it slightly hindered performance in the push for reliability? That's always the balance. So we will see.
Right, and it's the regulations that have kept them from fixing it. But what has been the effect, as far as Lucas is concerned, on the drivability of the car?
Well, we don't know yet. We probably won't know until after the race.
Okay.
But they're certainly not coming out and saying, oh, the car's not as good anymore, because frankly that would just be a horrible PR media disaster for them. But I'd be very interested in hearing his comments after the race.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see his times. Now, how did he do there last year? Do you remember?
Well, yeah. So when we last went there 2 years ago, I don't remember Lucas having a spectacular time whenever we've been here. I know he's been on the podium here, but the real standouts for me, of course, Sebastian Buemi, who's won both races here. Uh, and the thing I'm looking out for with Renault is, this is going to be the real test of their new suspension. And it was really the main thing they focused on between season 3 and season 4 was working on that suspension, getting the car to ride the curbs better. And that's the secret to this lap. It's all about curb usage. And so, the first couple of seasons they were able to do it really well. Season 3 they went in a different direction with it, with the suspension, that is. And so this is going to be the real test for them, and of course for their handling issues as well that they've been having, whether they can actually unlock the tire and sort out the other problems that they've had, because this lap is all about the drivability. It's all about handling. There's no long straights for them to be, letting the car breathe. I mean, even the pit straight isn't straight, and I think the fastest stretch is between the first and second chicane, and even that is sort of flowing and weaving, and you don't really get the car up to its top speed anywhere near there. So the corners themselves are quite quick, even though it's a lot of chicanes, and you still don't reach a very good top speed there though. And of course that last sector as well, which is a lot slower than the rest of the lap, they could encounter issues there as well. So this is the real test for them now.
Okay, so I have a question then. Is because of the nature of it, putting more of a premium on acceleration than on top speed, are we going to see maybe Neo or a team that runs more than one motor having a bit of an advantage? And I guess the reason I asked about Lucas initially is because it seems to me just different cars tend to do well at different circuits, but it's also true for different drivers. Different drivers tend to have their favorite circuits. I just couldn't recall if this is one that he really really liked to drive. So what do you think? Are we going to see some different cars coming forward because of the different demands of this kind of circuit? It seems like you're describing it in terms that it's fundamentally different to the ones we've driven thus far.
Well, of course, so far we've had a few oddball circuits, haven't we? And you got to remember, this circuit was designed for a very different car at the time. This was aimed at keeping battery temps low at a time when this technology was all very, very new. It was designed to make the cars look quick rather than actually kind of go quick. The circuits that you see now that get designed these days are so different. So in that sense, it is a bit of a unique spot on the calendar. And Fauzi points out in the chat room, there's 5 chicanes, or what feels like 5 chicanes in there. You don't really see that so much anymore in the circuits that you have now. So it is quite different. In a way, I feel like it's a bit more of a driver's circuit. They can really make the difference here. I mean, look at Jean-Eric Vergne in his first race, and he put it on pole position, the Andretti. So, and especially when you compare it to the other circuits we've had so far this season, we've had 2 permanent facilities so far in 4 races. And the other 2 tracks, they're more very typical circuits. But even then, Santiago, that was very, very far, a lot of, good straights to let the car breathe a little bit. Whereas we don't really have that in Punta del Este. So to go back to your question on, say, like Neo, I don't think it's necessarily going to be their sort of track. It's all about handling, depending on sort of how they've got the car set up. But if they've still got that issue of, they've got more way out the rear than most of the other guys out there. And so even for a team like Andretti as well, which is unnecessarily running gears, so I think for guys like them, they're probably going to struggle. It's all going to be about the balance of the car, the handling of it, and how the driver manages to handle that, at least in qualifying anyway. But of course, I'll take a good handling car over an efficient one, because if you're losing time with your efficiency, you can at least make up for a little bit in the corners, which there are, of course, a lot of in Punta del Este. It's one of the longer circuits we go to. So it is going to be a big balance. But the temperatures aren't supposed to be very, very high. Actually, this weekend,
Yep.
forecast
Yep.
thunderstorms.
Yep. Rain. We could have our first wet Formula E race.
How many times have we said this though? How many times have we
Yeah.
come in and said, "Oh, it could be the first wet Formula E race," but from the looks of the forecast at the moment, it could end up looking like the shakedown session we had in New York last year.
Yeah, but it's going to happen eventually. But so what you're saying really, it's all about conserving momentum through the corners. And so the best handling cars will have the biggest advantage. It's not about being able to apply more torque after the corner and accelerate up to speed more rapidly.
I mean, efficiency is still the name of the game, and it always is in Formula E. But this particular track, I feel, is more more handling limited than a lot of the other circuits that we visit.
Right. So it's essentially the Hungaro ring of Formula E.
If you like, yeah. And if you've got a car that can ride the curbs well and can handle those high speed flowing bits without the back end stepping out on you, then you're going to have a good weekend, I feel.
Right. So are we expecting Mahindra then to drift back to the fore after their less than stellar weekend? Have you heard anything about their reliability issues?
I mean, nothing new really. It's still that BMS shutdown era. So it'd be interesting to see if any other guys have that issue. I'd be quite keen to know, which battery they'll end up running in Rosenqvist's car, whether they've managed to get a fix for the one that failed, or whether they'll go back to the one that they ended up using in the Marrakesh race. Of course, you do get one joker change before you start getting penalties. So, of course, they will be quite keen to keep that to a minimum of having to swap the batteries around. But in terms of the cause of it and stuff like that, nothing new as yet. We might get some more answers when we actually get going this weekend. But I would fully expect Mahindra to be right up there. I wouldn't look at their historic results here, because if I remember rightly, the last time we raced there, they were pretty much the slowest team out there.
Somewhere between dead and last?
Yeah, somewhere like that. But of course, they didn't have Nick Heidfeld in that race because he was out after he'd done his wrist in, doing that epic save in Putrajaya. And it's weird that I still remember that. But I definitely think they'll be right up there. They've got such an efficient car. It runs super in race trim.
Yeah, well, and they were up there again. It was just they had the battery issues at the last race. So I mean, that's really the question for them. Who are we looking at? Maybe who could potentially be in trouble then, if it's not going to be them? Yeah,
so potentially Renault, if they haven't been able to sort all the issues out with their suspension, their handling. For me, DS Virgin could be quick in qualifying. They could be quick in qualifying, but that gearbox of theirs, although it hasn't been sort of the headline of the last couple of races, has cost them though.
How?
I mean, well, Bird had another gearbox issue in Mexico, which is why he wasn't able to progress so far through the field.
Okay.
As say, Lucas, who he was effectively sharing the back row with. So depending on how that plays out, it just seems to keep causing them issues. And, they're the only team that I can recall that have actually increased the number of gears on their car, like ever.
Right.
So, I don't think that's, the core root of it. It's bound to be something a lot more technical than that. But the thing, we don't really have answers. We don't know if even, DS know what the issue is. And of course, they're putting on an advertisement at the moment because supposedly, Techeetah will be using their powertrain next season. And of course, Virgin need to put themselves in an advert to get, a manufacturer on board. Supposedly that'll be with Audi, although that is just a rumor. I think I read that on eRacing 365. Okay. So, it's swings and roundabouts. We don't really know, and that's what I love about it. But it's something to watch out for. Venturi might get caught out just because their drivers don't know the circuit.
Yeah.
If I think back hard enough, I think they're the only team where neither of their drivers know the circuit. I'm struggling to think of another team that is in the same boat as them. Of course, they'll have had the simulator, they'll have done a lot of preparation in advance. But I guess just kind of knowing in that pressure situation, being able to call back on a little bit of knowledge from a couple of years ago, it's never a bad thing. So I'm not saying that Venturi will, lose this race because of this, but I think it's just maybe something to keep an eye on. I'd be very keen to see how they run because they've not fulfilled their potential, and neither have Jaguar. And I would love to see, both of those guys get a clean weekend. Although if this rain is coming, I don't think anyone's going to be having a clean weekend.
Yeah, well, if the rain comes, it's going to be a real test for the mechanics and teams to get the cars set up to deal with it.
I mean, they don't even have anything to go off of. The wettest session we've had was that New York shakedown, and of course they knew it was going to be dry the next day. And otherwise in qualifying, we've had some spatters of rain in London.
Yeah.
Donington, I'm sure they ran in the wet, but they wouldn't have been working on setup at the time. So, but these are all experienced guys. These are teams that know what they're doing. They're rich in motorsporting history, so they'll know the kind of fundamentals to have to do. They'll know that we'll start here and work our way forward. Induce a little bit of understeer in the car just to kind of offset the rear. How they handle the power delivery, because of course it's just instant torque. There's bound to be some wild oversteer moments.
Yeah, and it's hard because you're limited to what you can do with the suspension, but what you've done with the suspension you've designed. And really, you're right, it's amazing given the number of seasons we've run. The most we've seen is like a single damp practice session. So.
Yeah, it is bizarre. I mean, Formula E is all about, pushing that climate change thing. It just seems to bring the good weather wherever it goes.
Yeah.
I find it slightly ironic. The thing, if it doesn't rain, then the thing you got to keep on top of, and it's something I briefly mentioned earlier, was, how the track conditions are constantly changing because of the sand being blown onto the circuit. And if you remember back to Sebastian Buemi's qualifying woes in season 2,
right,
all started because sand from his brakes, sand from the beach got in his brakes, and they didn't realize for half the season that this had actually happened, or until the start of the European season or something like that. So it does play a big factor, and I'd love to know how much grip there is on sand on top of tarmac, which has then got water on top of it as well. I'd love to know how much grip is on there.
Probably not as much as they'd like. This would be my guess, but hey,
there's never enough grip as they'd like, even if it's perfect conditions. Like, oh, we want more grip.
Yes, I think if you're a driver, that's like breathing and taxes. Yes, we would like more grip. So any last surprises? Any last thoughts about this? I mean, you talked about qualifying. We've seen how much the order of the group qualifying can affect where drivers finish in relationship to the Super Pole group. Do we expect it to just get better the more it's driven on because the sand will get cleared, or was that the pattern last time around, or will the first drivers up maybe have some sort of advantage because the weather will come in?
I think it's going to be more of a lottery than it ever has been, because if the tracks are constantly changing, it could be between sessions, the wind picks up, you get more sand blown on there than there was before. And so actually you've then got a worse condition than the guys who just went out before you, but then it will clear up, and then the guys after you will have even better conditions. So it's gonna be really fascinating. It's just gonna play out as the day goes on. It's gonna depend on the wind, how sheltered certain parts of the circuit are from the wind, and of course the rain.
Ah, yes, the rain, that ultimate joker in the deck for motorsport. Okay, well, I think unless there's anything else, we are actually to that point in the show where we might have to pick a comment of the week, which you said you would take care of. Are you seriously going to give me that? Are you seriously going to give me that teenager look? Like,
That teenager
but
look.
I thought you were going to do
I
that. Oh my
I am.
god. Oh
I'm
my
looking
gosh.
through them now and trying to pick a winner. There's a couple of
Well,
good ones.
I not that I want to tell you what to do, but I always enjoy reading some of the best attempts, some of the contenders before I make my final choice.
Well, of course, last week's winner, Josh Covey, he's in the chat room,
Uh
and he says, "I'm definitely not supposed to be working right now."
oh. Okay. Uh,
That is a good one.
that,
Artemy X eRadio got a driver interview before the main show, which we will most definitely be bragging about to the Missed Apex crew. Fauzi's come in with grip is synonymous with Formula E, obviously, and actually predicts Mortara to win the race in Punta del Este after I said that it was going to hurt them. Well, not definitively, but
no.
that's a good one. And Artemy X again, formerly is exclusively oddball circuits. That's one of the things that makes it great. I think we are gonna go with Artemy X's first comment though. eRadio got a driver interview before the main show because that's bragging rights, baby.
Absolutely. And there you have it. Congratulations, Artemy.
Comment of the week.
And speaking of bragging, I'm not going to say that we, of all shows, remember to do our comment of the week before we end the actual show, but it's looking like a bit of a trend here, I'd have to say. Mr. Stevens, where can we find you? What are you up to?
So there's a few things. Before I go and plug away the things I've been doing myself, I will give a little plug to the Missed Apex podcast because you haven't checked it out already. We had an interview with Mark Gallagher the other day, and it was just it was such an interesting conversation. You know, the guy just has a million stories to tell, and we've barely scratched the surface of that. And we have a competition at the moment. We are giving away 3 copies of his new book, The Business of Winning. So if you go to the pinned tweet on the Missed Apex Twitter account, that's at Missed Apex F1. You go to the pinned tweet, you retweet and follow for your chance to win. The competition closes on Sunday, so be sure to get in there and just check out that episode while you're there because it was just so much fun. It's a shame you couldn't really join us for that one, Matt, but I'm sure you enjoyed the show.
I'm certain Spanners didn't purposefully schedule it for a day when he knew I wasn't available.
Never. No, it was an inside job.
I want to know how much you paid him for that, but you can tell me off air.
You have the privilege of joining him for our next guest, who I won't say the name of just yet because I don't want to spoil it. But we have others. You know, we don't waste time at Missed Apex Podcast during the off season.
No. While others are lolling about on the beach. Oh my goodness, there's a Sebastian Vettel quote that just came to mind, and I cannot use it because it is that unsafe for work.
Oh no!
But you know the one I'm thinking of. Other teams are dunking certain parts of their anatomy in the pool. We here at Missed Apex and eRadio have kept the lamp on and have been working hard to bring you the best in Formula One and Formula E.
Of course, and highlighting the best in Formula E, of course.
Well, who else?
We know exactly what we're doing.
What is this? This is our second major interview we've had in 3 weeks.
Yeah. I want to keep them coming.
I
as
do
well.
too.
So
they're fascinating, and you do a wonderful job. And it's great that we can get the attention of the drivers and of the team principals. If you didn't bother to listen to the Mark Preston interview, go find it and listen to it. It's great that we can get the attention and that they will make the time to tell us what they think, and that they will be so straightforward about it. There's no cagey PR speak there. They tell us what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's great. You know, it's such a different atmosphere in Formula E compared to a lot of other series, you know, especially Formula One, which is rather cagey indeed. Although I think that's changing slightly with liberties,
Yeah.
rulership at the moment. Can I plug my own stuff now?
Well, this is where I was going to go, but it's not just eRadio and Missed Apex that have been up to big things. You yourself have had some milestones.
Yeah, so this weekend I will be back doing the 750 Motor Club coverage for the Autosport magazine and Motorsport News as well. It's the start of the new season. I'm hugely, hugely excited about it as well. Of course, it does mean I'll be missing the Punta del Este E3, but I'll catch up and I'll make sure that I have all the information at hand for when we do our race review next week. But in this week's edition of Autosport Magazine, you can check out my first feature on BT Sports coverage of the MotoGP season for this year. They have got a ton of really cool ideas and implementing new technologies into making the coverage just so much better. And I'm hugely excited for MotoGP this season. Another race I'll be missing this weekend being at Donington. It's the start of that category as well in Qatar. So it's a hugely exciting time at the moment with everything getting underway.
Yes, well, you best have that DVR queued up and ready to go. Although I will say, because I oftentimes have to watch the Formula E races later than they're on, there's a certain nicety to being able to go and just hit pause when you want to figure out what just happened, rather than just trying to slam it all onto a page as fast as possible.
Or when you want to pee, that's my biggest issue. Sitting down for an hour without peeing, that's tough.
You might consider seeing a doctor for that, would be my suggestion. All right, as for me, I'm Matt PT55. You can find me on the Twitters. Be sure to tell me what you think in vaguely polite terms. And remember, chicks dig heels, wounds cause scars, and glory is a fungible concept under certain philosophical precepts. This has been eRadio Show.